Well, today we're going to talk about small business government contracts. What are they? Where do you find them? Why does the government have small business government contracts? What are they buying? Who's doing the buying? How can you win them? All of that stuff. We're going to cover all that today. I'm Rick Howard, former government contracting, acquisitions officer. I was a program manager for the Air Force, managed about $82 billion in contracts over my career. And then I started a consulting business after I retired, which helps companies sell to the government. Through that, eventually, here we are. I have GovClose, which trains public sector sales professionals. So what is a small business government contract? U.S. government is the single biggest purchaser of goods and services in the world. They buy everything, not just weapons. That's what people think of, not just tanks, F-22s. They buy software. They buy accounting services. They buy landscaping services. Every military base is a little town, if you've ever been to one. And, you go on there, and if you go onto an Air Force base, you may see a golf course, soccer fields, schools. People live on these bases. There are movie theaters on some of them, shopping, police, hospitals. So everything that you could think of, almost everything you could think of, the government's buying. And the Small Business Administration actually sets goals for federal agencies for how much of their contracting dollars should go to small businesses. Going back in time, in looking at the 101, hey, what is a small business defined by? What are the codes associated with a small business? What are where do you actually register your business? We're going to go through all of that. First, there are a lot of different contracts when we're talking about what the federal does, what the federal government is buying, their small business contracts. Now, they're not all going to be set aside. You hear the word set aside a lot, right? And I started off with there are goals that the SBA sets for the different federal agencies. I'm going to actually go over what those goals are for FY25 as well. That I think just starting off basic, what is a small business contract versus a large company contract? Well, to start off, there are going to be size standards, right? Depending on what your company does. And those size standards are typically going to be associated with something called a NAICS code, an NAICS code. And so for certain industries, and you'll have to look up your codes for certain industries, and I would say for a lot of them, if you have 500 employees or less, often that business is going to be defined as a small business. Now, for some industries, it's going to be defined by the annual revenue. Could be 10 million, 20 million, 25 million, but you're going to have to look up those specific codes to actually see what you're going to fall into as far as what the category is going to be. Now, as far as set aside, so you see right here, I'm on the SBA website. They're talking about different types of set asides. Now, a set aside is when you go to SAM.gov and a solicitation comes out, meaning the government is now, they have money and a requirement to buy something. Doesn't matter. Weight set, landscaping services, accounting services, F-22 parts, whatever that is. That solicitation could be set aside for a small business. And that would just mean that you have to be a small business in order to submit a proposal. Of course, you could go through the trouble of submitting a proposal if you weren't a small business, but the government is not going to look at that. They're going to discard that. You don't fit the qualifications. You don't fit the set aside type. Now, what you could do, though, by the way, is you could partner with a small business and potentially, as a sub, still get in there. Now, there's other types of set asides besides small business. Okay. And also, just because a solicitation is not set aside, right? It could say full and open competition, and we'll go to SAM.gov and check that out. That doesn't mean a small business can't win it. That just means it wasn't set aside for small business from the get-go. All right. So here we can see, and by the way, if you want like a really in-depth understanding of small business contracts, go to SBA.gov right here. That's where I am. There's a lot of information here, but I just wanted to kind of give you the reality and break it down for you. So you've got set asides for small businesses. You've got set asides for government contracting programs, and it kind of walks through all of that. It's talking about, hey, if it's 150 grand or less, it's probably going to be a small business contract. That's not always the case, but often when you're talking about smaller contracts, it could be. There are sole source contracts, right? So just to complicate things further, you could have a solicitation from the government set aside for small business, and that could either be competed among just small businesses, among woman-owned small businesses, ADAs, or you could have a sole source contract to a small business. So there's several ways the government can award contracts. But let's take a look before we get into that. I wanted to just give you a big picture of how much, because a lot of people don't realize how high of a percentage the government spending for these type of contracts actually goes to small businesses, right? What are the goals? What are they actually being awarded? And by the way, guys, less than half of 1% of the small businesses in the United States sell to the US government. And that's astronomical considering the US government is the single biggest purchaser of goods and services. And they are required, the government's required to buy from small businesses. Now, this is an eyesore, this spread, but you can get this from SBA.gov as well. This is the small business FY20 fee, FY20 fee, FY25 small business goals um, for 2025. Now, each federal agency, they usually have a different goal for each agency. Okay. And you could see the funding department here, and then the small business goal. You're also going to notice that they have a goal, not just for small businesses, they have disadvantaged business. They have veteran owned small business. That's SDVOSB. They have woman owned small business goals, hub zone goals, subcontracting goals. So there are a lot of these goals that the SBA is setting for the federal agencies. And I mentioned earlier that the agencies often exceed the requirement or the goal that the SBA sets for them. Now, check it out. Prime small business goal, like some of these percentages are really, really high. I like looking at the DoD just because, look, 23% is the goal. Okay. That's for prime small business. But I also want you to understand a lot of people think that these set asides or these certifications that you can get, and that's what these are. So just, I guess, going back to 101, if you're a small business, and most of us are, even if you're doing really well, you could certainly be doing $5 million in sales a year and still be considered a small business. In fact, I can almost guarantee that you would be. Just going through here, you can take a look and see what the goals are. Look at some of these goals. Department of Interior, 50%. I mean, come on. That is extremely, extremely high. But you register your business to sell to the government in SAM.gov, and then sometimes you can self-certify for things, but most of these set-asides or these certifications that you're seeing here, woman-owned small business, SDVOSB, HubZone, where are the other ones? The other one that 8A is the other big one, really. These are things you don't just sell, you don't just check a box, okay? There's an application process for these, and just because you have a set aside certification does not mean contracts are gonna fall out of the sky and land in your lap. Government contracting is hard. It is a long timeline, all right? So, plan on 6 to 18 months to win your first government contract. It could take longer, could take shorter. I mean, there's always variation here, but there are also some advantages. Okay. So, despite the complexity, despite the length of time, what is great about government contracting is that the government has to publish all of their contracts. Media, there's criteria for each contract. So, I can go and I can look at how much the government spends, who they're putting on contract, how much, what for. There's over 300 different actual criteria for each contract. So we get a very accurate picture about how the government buys what you're trying to sell, or if you're working for a company, what your company's selling. We could see what can you actually potentially make. So these are the advantages. We can actually approach this very logically and have a very clear path. So although it is the long game, uh, we can have a very common sense approach to this and not waste time and money doing things that aren't going to move the needle. So I'm a big fan of you knowing all the information going into this. Okay, so what do we know so far? We know that the government is required to put small businesses on contract. We know the government buys a lot of different things in a lot of different areas. And we can see which agencies have different goals, right? Typically, by the way, I mean, you could see here, SDVOSB, it's about 5% right down the board. Woman-owned small business, 5%. HubZone, 3%. And I don't know if 8A is even on this one. It might not be. 8A is kind of the king of small business certifications and set-asides. And this is why. 8A, again, even if you go through the process of getting 8A certified, contracts aren't going to fall in your lap, but it does relieve some of the policy and regulation that governs the way the government makes purchases, and it allows them to sole source contract to 8A companies a little bit easier. Now, as we walk through this, I just wanted to go through what the SBA published as far as fiscal year 24 spending. Okay. Now, the government works on the fiscal year. The fiscal year starts October 1st. It ends at the end of September. So everything's measured in the fiscal year. And you can see here what they're saying is that in between FY23 and FY24, we see this $4.6 billion increase in spending. Take a look here. I'm going to zoom in on this. All right. Fiscal year 24, small business spending, $183.2 billion. Okay. These are on small business contracts. Okay. And there aren't that many companies. We can actually find out how many companies won contracts, and we can do some simple math. I believe the average company would, and I'm talking, when I say the average, keep in mind, I'm dividing this number by the total number of companies. It's around 70,000. Average company, it's around high 2 millions, $2 to $3 million is what on average each company is making. So it's not nothing, all right? This is, by the way, it's a lot more for some companies, a lot less for others, right? But work, so $183 billion, that's 28% of spending that went to small business contracts, okay? And the goal, remember, is usually on average around 23%. So what do we see here? We saw in FY23, it was 28.3%. So that's pretty consistent. FY22, 26. So year over year, not only are we spending more money on small businesses, but we're also, the percentage of spending is increasing. Now, what I am basically trying to figure out for this year, and if you guys, anyone on here knows the number, what I want to know is the number of small businesses that won in FY24 lower or greater than FY23? Because we have been seeing a downward trend. We've been seeing less companies engaging in the government contracting process year over year. Even if it did increase, it's not by much because, there's, I believe, over 34 million small businesses in the United States right now. And let me see here. We did some SAM.gov. I might have to do a quick Google search. Again, it was around 72,000, low 70,000s, not enough the numbers to give you a really inaccurate version of that. But that's how many companies won contracts, right? So of the 34 million companies that are out there, we had about 70,000 that are engaged with the government contracting process. So to me, I don't want to say it's a blue ocean because it's hard, but there are not a lot of companies engaged here. Very, very few. Okay. So let's just start with that. All right, Rick, what does this all mean? Right. We have these small business categories. We see, I got it. There's a lot of money being spent on small businesses. Now, what do these contracts look like? Okay. Now, there's a few ways to figure this out. And for anyone that's been following our content, you know that I love looking at USA Spending, for instance, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to start looking at some of the small business spending, okay, just to get an idea of what this looks like, who's doing the spending, what kinds of things the government's buying. And then I will get a little bit more precise as far as where are we looking for these opportunities and how are you going to win them? Because it is not just looking for a solicitation. That, in fact, that is, I would say, the biggest mistake. So if somebody wants to bluff the bottom line up front here, if you're new to government contracting, biggest mistake, and I've done 600 to 700 consultations like with companies since I started my consulting business. And then I don't know how many conversations as an acquisitions officer with companies in my office just, either complaining about not winning contracts or just trying to figure it out, right? Often companies, by the way, like, just to give you a little piece of what my acquisitions Air Force experience was, I was mainly working in developing technological solutions for classified and unclassified um, problem sets that the government had. So in Massachusetts, I'd be working with MIT tech startups. We'd be working with the Silicon Valley tech startups. A lot of these companies were not traditional defense contractors. They didn't understand the process. It's very different. So I had to help them, even on the government side, like, hey, you have the solution we want. This is what you got to do. It could be a frustrating process. And so I want to clear that up for anybody that's, looking at the number one problem, which I mentioned, which is companies discover SAM.gov and they find solicitations and they just start writing proposals on these solicitations. Oh, it's a RFP, request for proposal. I'm going to I'm going to write that proposal and send it in. And then they lose. And then they see another solicitation. By the way, these proposals are hard to write. They are complicated and it takes a long time. They're very precise. Yeah, but even down to the font, page number, font, very technical. And so it can be frustrating to start writing these, thinking this is the process, and you're losing over and over again. And the company's coming to me. I mean, this was something I could almost predict 1 out of every 3 calls would start like this if it was a company that had no success. And they'd say, look, Rick, now by the 4th or 5th proposal I'm sending in, not only am I losing, but I can see that my competitors are winning. And it looks like these solicitations, now that I've read so many of them, it looks like some of these solicitations were written for my competitor. So it's rigged, right? The whole system's rigged. But this is what I would tell them. Look, that solicitation probably was written for your competitor, but the system's not rigged. What you missed was everything that comes before that solicitation, right? So you're starting here, but the government contracting process starts way before that. Way before that. There's a whole market research phase before the solicitation comes out. So that's the part I want to get out there. You want to find these opportunities as early as possible, and there's no way we can engage with the government on these early opportunities to make things, first of all, find out if we're wasting our time. And then if not, if we have a good solution for the government, how to make it much more likely that you're going to win in the end. And I'll cover that towards the end. This is ironically run by GSA. And I'm not going to get into why that's ironic quite yet, maybe later. Those of you that know me know why I probably think that's ironic. But this is a government website, okay? It's good and it's bad. It's run by the government, so it's kind of clunky, but it's free. All right, what does USA Spending do? This is a way of seeing how much the government's spending and what they're spending on, okay? So what I like to do, I'm going to fiscal year. You can go back and search. I think, when does this go back? Till 2008. You don't really want to go back to 2008 unless you're doing something really, really specific. Okay. I like to go back the past couple of years. I want to get a sense of how the government spends, who's doing the spending. Does funding change? Yes. Does the way the government purchase things change? Sure. We see a lot of that this year. But does that happen fast? No. Even with anything happening this year, it is going to take a long time to make any big changes. Acquisitions reform is very slow. I'm going to be doing a video on YouTube on that coming up. By the way, if you guys haven't followed our YouTube channel, check it out. Just type in GovClose, GovClose, and check it out on YouTube. We have over 1.2 million views. We've got interviews with everything from CEOs of startups selling, government acquisitions officers, contracting officers, people in this space, a lot of instruction from me. We have proposal writing stuff. We've got SAM.gov, how to use SAM.gov, like very intricate advanced strategies on there. And of course, you can go to GovClose.com if you want our 1-year training program, but that's where we're teaching individuals how to implement their consulting business, how to sell to the government, how to get an account executive job with a company selling to the government. So it's everything from 101 basics, I don't know anything about government contracting, to advanced strategies. And then we don't stop there. It's implementation. So we're helping them start a business. We're helping them get the job. We're helping them win the contracts. FY25, so we're going to go back. I'm going to go back to FY22. Okay. Now I want to look at a specific category because that's really what's going to help me. And John gave me aircraft parts. So that's a NAICS code that he gave me. So I'm going to go plug that in. Anybody else has one, you can send it to me. 6413. All right. Now, first I'm just going to hit submit because I want to see what the total spending is on this. Every category of service, product, tech that the government buys is going to be slightly different. Okay. And that's one of the things I just want to um, get through to everybody here. So we have to be, this is where I say we can get a big advantage in winning government contracts. Understand the data. Okay. Let me zoom in on this so I can give you a little tutorial here. All right. What we're looking at, these are all contracts. We've got the contract itself. There's the contract number. And this is the company, Boeing, right? No surprise this popped up because right now I'm looking at all contracts, not just small business. So you've got a lot of these bigger companies. It's also, I think, John, just because of the NAICS code you gave me, this aircraft parts NAICS code that, just by definition, we're probably going to see a lot of the big defense contractors, right? They build airplanes. But let's take a look. Okay. And we can see there's a lot of information, obligations. Like these are, I mean, what are we looking at here? Millions, billions, 1.6 billion to General Atomics. Um, so that's section one. Now, section two, this tells us which agency is doing the spending. Okay. Now, this is the Department of Defense. It's telling us 54.13 billion. This is over, remember, I work FY 25, 24, 23, 22. So this is over the past 4 fiscal years. Okay. So that's kind of a total roll up. You can scroll through there, but that's not my point. So, and then there's one more section I want to show you, and I promise we'll stop looking at graphs and stuff here in a bit. And that is this results over time. So I do like to take a look at this because this is going to, and I'm about to, by the way, I'm going to take a look at this and then we're going to look at how much was actually spent on small business. All right. So in 24, 16.8 billion spent total on this aircraft parts. This is just aircraft parts. FY23, 16.2 billion, 14.5 billion in 22. We're in FY25 right now. It ends at the end of September. And I've noticed a lag in the reporting of spending from agencies. So I would expect it's probably not going to really have an accurate idea about FY25 spending till January, at least in USA spending, but we'll see. All right. Now, the big question is, and you guys let me know what you think, how much of this spending do you think actually went to small businesses? I'm guessing, even though 23% is the kind of goal the SBA puts out there on average, I wouldn't be surprised if it's less than that just because of this category. But let's take a look. The way we do that is we go to word type. Sorry, that is incorrect. Recipient type. And I'm just going to click small business. Okay. Hit submit again. And if USA spending works, then we're going to get a idea here now of within that NAICS code. Oh, and actually, let's see, was I right or wrong? Okay, FY24, $2.4 billion. So, and what did we see? I think it was around $16 billion that was spent in FY24. So, but still, that is really significant, right? That's a significant amount of spending. So, John, hopefully that answers your question on aircraft pipes. Now, I'm not giving this is government, this is small business contracts. I'm not going to do a total breakdown here, but what my students do in GovClose, what I do with clients, and if you're looking at this and you're trying to figure out, how this applies to you, how you can win some of these small business contracts, the next steps for this are as follows. One, I want to know who I'm targeting, right? So if I'm a small business, I need to know the agencies that spend money on small business contracts for what I'm selling, right? We could see here it didn't change, but it often does. It was DoD was the biggest purchaser. It's aircraft parts. So of course it stayed the same, but it is telling us we can go to sub-agency and there are tools you guys can pay for. I'm using this because it's free and everybody can actually use it. I want to take a quick second to talk to anybody watching this that's interested in starting a government contracting business or starting a new profession in government contracting. The students that graduate our program, they go on to start their own consulting firms, winning high dollar consulting clients. They go on to land high paying salaried positions as account executives with companies that sell to the government. I'm so proud of the people that have gone through our program. And if you are considering either a job or a business, and by the way, some of our students are doing both, as I did. They're running a consulting business and they'll have an account executive job. It's transforming their lives. It's bringing true wealth to them and their families. Back to the video. See this DLA, Defense Logistics Agency? John, that's a big hint at who you want to be selling to, right? Because we want to know, you don't want to just, we're not throwing darts. Remember earlier I said that people that don't win government contracts start out with a solicitation? With some exceptions, that is true, right? Every little industry is different. But I want to find out about the opportunities as early as possible, and I need to know who I'm selling to. It does not surprise me that Defense Logistics Agency is involved here. Now, if you pay for something like GovWin IQ, HireGov, like you can get, they have tools that really break the data down a little bit more, but I can start looking at, okay, what is the exact office that I'm going to be working with here at DLA or in the Air Force? Because the Air Force is a big place, right? There's tons of acquisition shops all over the place. I was at Hanscom Air Force Base, but there's 2 PEOs. There's, I don't know, probably between 6 and 10 divisions. I don't even know how many branches there are, 30. And then each branch could have hundreds of people in it. So you want to know, that's just one base. We want to know exactly who we are selling to. So in John's case, John asked me about aircraft parts. Well, now I know that at least with a few clicks of a button that Defense Logistics Agency, Air Force, and Army are kind of the top 3. Now, there's a lot more to know here. I want to know how they put small businesses on contract for these parts. I want to know, if John has a special, and I know, I think John is a SDVOSB, but if not, he probably could be. So I would want to know, all right, well, who rewards service disabled veteran-owned small businesses, the most contracts? And it might not be DLA, it might be the Coast Guard down here. But even though this is $132 million they're spending, if this is the agency that awards to service disabled veteran-owned small businesses and John's business, it has that certification, then this is his target, okay? And this matters. So this is really the first step, everyone, in if you're trying to determine either should I be selling to the government or trying to put together a strategy for selling to the government. Research, it's not looking at SAM.gov. It's going back and looking what has the government spent money on in the past 3 or 4 years, because that is going to give us the roadmap. Okay, so you can see here, guys, what's also cool about USA Spending is you can just click on the NAICS code or product service code drop down, and it's going to give you a bunch of the actual codes. So you can just click on that. So machine shops. All right, so let's submit. Remember, this is going to give us total spending for both small and large businesses. Okay. Again, solicitation, company name. Got it? Look at this, DOD again, but far spending, right? So this is total, and it's 239 million spent from the DOD. And each year we've got, what do we got here? In 2024, $76.5 million, 2374. Here's something else, be the cause, just to think about here. This is not the only code that whatever machine shop or machine operations things are, services are, products are that you're selling, guaranteed there are other codes, probably multiple other codes that the contracts are falling under. So there's more spending than this. All right. Contracting officers, I've seen the exact same thing awarded under like 15 different codes. That's just the way of things. Okay. About what this does to is it gives us a good big picture idea of the spending. It gives us an idea of who's doing the spending, right? But DOD, let's see, let's look at the sub-agencies here. Navy, Army, Defense Logistics Agency, okay? And this is for all contracts for all company sizes. But this live stream is about small businesses. So we want to know how much of this is going to small businesses. Recipient type, small business, submit. And what are we down to here? 209 million with the DoD. Was it yearly? 62 million. That's actually really good, right? So this is like the exact opposite of what we saw with the last code. We're seeing most of these contracts. So for machine shops, the machine operations, we can. By the way, I'm kind of curious what they're actually buying under that code. We'll take a look. Um, but now most of this is actually going to small businesses, which is interesting, right? So that tells me if I'm a small business, this could be an interesting place for me to compete, but I need more information than that, right? So it always comes back. Let's take a look at the sub agencies again. Okay. Now we're looking at Navy as the number one, Army as the number two, and then DLA down here. Okay, that's interesting. So that could tell us, barring any other information, that you're targeting the Navy. And I want to know the specific Navy office that's doing this. But let's take a look at one of these. I'm going to look at one of these actual contracts, just to give you guys an idea of some of the things that we can look at here. And let's see, maybe we can find one that the Navy did. All right, here we go. Oh, there we go. Sweet. All right, let's go here. What I did, guys, I just clicked on one of the contracts. Okay. So it's telling me it's a Department of Defense contract. It's telling me what the obligated amount was. So this is $11 million. Total funding, 14. And now again, it's very limited as to what it will tell you about the contracts themselves. But here it's telling us milling equipment. Okay. Here's one thing I like to look at. I want to look at the competition details because this is going to tell me how many proposals came in. Look, they received 4 offers. And this was competed under simplified acquisitions. It's the way the government can buy from small businesses. It's faster. Um, it's possible if you guys are interested, I can do a live session on that. That's really good. This is not a lot of offers. So I'd have to look at a lot more of these. We might plug this into something like GovIQ to really get an idea of what the average number of offers received is. But we have a couple things going for us so far. We've got the fact that most of the spending, even though it's relatively low, most of the spending goes to small businesses. And, we looked at the first contract, which is a good sized contract and not a lot of offers received. So again, I'd have to look at a lot more of those. And by the way, there's a ton more information in here you can find out. But that's really interesting. By the way, I can click on the name of the company. If you guys really want to zone in, find a company that's like yours. Let me get rid of this. Hopefully be the cause that answered some of your questions. Um, and this is going to give us a lot more information just about that company. This is a good way to do competitive research, right? On small business contracts. This is important, right? This is how you can look and see how a company has become successful. So in this case, we can see that they've done 28.4 million. And I can see what that timeline looks like here. We can see that they had a hell of a year in FY20, right? And then FY24, this could be a lot of reasons why that's less. No new awards in FY25 so far. They could have an award and it's just not reported yet. So we can see that kind of climb. Um, Now we see that it's going to also tell us what codes they're using. So, for instance, whoever it was that gave me this machining code, this company is also using codes like machine shops, machine tool manufacturing, fabricated metals, corrugated, and you can see how much they've done in business, and you can see who they're doing business with. Like this is giving you a lot of information, guys. This is how you run a successful business. Like I wish I had this information for B2B and B2C, but I don't. Nobody does, right? Because companies aren't going to tell you everything that they've spent money on and who and how competitive it was. They're also not going to forecast and tell you what they're going to spend money on in the future. But this is what every small business should be doing if you're thinking about selling to the government. All right, so we're going to do this again here, and we're going to look at electrical contractors. All right. All right, so this code from ARW Solutions 238210, electrical contractors and other wiring. I'm going to submit that. All right. So seeing the DODs at the top, these are the sub agencies. So we can see that. Now, this is all business sizes. We always go big to small because I want to know if there's a change. I want to know if this changes from Army to another sub agency. That's good for me to know as a business owner, as a consultant, whatever it is that I'm doing, so I can focus on the right types of opportunities. You know, the VA, for instance, if you're a service disabled veteran owned small business, there's some categories where almost 100% of the awards are going to companies with that type of certification. So let's see here. Army, and then the last thing I want to do, I just want to see year over year spending. It's good. 821 million, 944.9 million. Okay. So we got an idea. 24, 821 million, and the Army was at the top. Now we're going to down select to recipient type, small business. Okay. So now we're going to get an idea of how much of that 821 million last year went to small businesses. And the answer is 563 million, right? So that's really, really good, right? That's not 23%, all right? I don't know what the percentage is, but it's more than 23%. It's like 60% or something, right? Yeah, that's huge. So again, another category where small businesses are killing it. But that doesn't really mean anything except that this could be a good category for you, right? What else do we want to know? Well, what was it? Army was at the top for all business. But hey, check this out. Check this out, ARW Solutions. The VA is the number one purchaser. Now that we've down selected, now that we have removed the large businesses, I just hit my mic. Now that we have removed the large businesses and we're only looking at the small businesses now, the top purchaser, the top federal agency that buys has changed to the VA. Now here's a free piece of advice. If you do this for your category and you see the VA at the top, remember when I said the VA awards a lot of SDVOSB, um, a lot of service disabled veteran owned small business contracts? Do you remember when we looked at this spreadsheet this is from the Small Business Administration, and it is the business goals. They set the business goals for each of the agencies, right? And so here's service disabled veteran owned small business. See how it's 5%? It even says 5% for the VA, right? So you'd think 5% would go to service disabled veteran owned small businesses. And by the way, it says 29% for small businesses, but they're awarding more than that to small businesses. And the VA has, aside from whatever the SBA does, the VA has their own policies. And their policies have them looking at service disabled veteran owned small businesses and veteran owned businesses ahead of other companies in some cases, which means that we see a lot more awards to SDVOSBs, which means that when I look at, and this is the wrong one, when I look at this, the first thing I think to myself is, how much of this is going to service disabled veteran owned small businesses? Okay. Look, I've got a service disabled veteran owned small business, but if you don't ARW Solutions, then you need to know without question how much of this you could actually compete for. If it comes back that, and I can run it, if it says of the 298 million, 290 million went to service disabled businesses and you don't have that, then this is not your target. Right? So you could see that there's some complexity here. There are some different things that we are going to go through. In that case, by the way, then the FAA might be your top target, but we just don't know yet. We could see that still a lot of money is being spent each year on this code, right? And I'm going to do you a favor here and I'm going to down select one more time. This time, I'm going to look at the service disabled veteran. I want to know, remember this number, guys, 298 million. So now we want to look at, see how there's a service disabled veteran owned business here? Let me click on that. I'm going to click on both of these. I'm going to get rid of the small business one. Click submit. Who wants to bet me? I'll bet you $100 the VA is still at the top of the list. What I wouldn't bet on is I don't know what kind of percentage we're going to see here. Oh, look at that. VAs, who owes me $100? Somebody owes me $100. VA's at the top. Remember that number? Dude, this is almost almost all of it is going to service disabled and veteran owned businesses. So if you don't have a veteran owned business, then the VA is not your target. So I just helped you out there, hopefully. All right, we got another one here. Treehouse Juicery. Waste collection. All right, why not? And I won't skip over waste collection here. Let's go back. Again, I'm going to get out of here. I always reset it, guys, because you'd be surprised. Even though it looks like, you could clear it out in here in the filters, I've had it backfire on me a few times. So going again, we're looking you're on USA Spending. We're looking at the past 3 fiscal years of federal spending just to get a sense of how much is being spent. We want to find out small business spending on this NAICS code that Treehouse Juicery has given me here. And they want to know waste collection, 562100. It didn't type in. Nope. I'm really I don't know about you guys, but I was never great at typing to begin with. Why didn't that? Nothing came up there. What did I typed it in wrong. 562100. Maybe I didn't type it in wrong. 562. Okay, well, waste collection's right here. Solid waste collection. All right, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to just do waste collection, all right? I'm going to look at total spending. By the way, I don't know if anyone else is noticing this, but there is a trend here. When we first type in any code, what's the first agency that's popping up? Department of Defense, right? So for anybody out there that's been concerned about government contracting or you've wanted to get into it, but you see like what's going on with Doge, you're looking at spending cuts, let me just assure you, because even though this administration's loud about what they're trying to do, I don't know how many, while I was in the military, after, every administration has their own spending priorities. Our government has tried acquisitions reform, major acquisitions reform, over and over and over and over again. It's just really loud right now. But we already know we're going to be spending more money next year than we did this year. And they're already talking about an extra $1 trillion in Department of Defense and infrastructure budget. We're going to look at what's going on right now overseas. We are going to be spending more money, and we're going to be spending a lot in the DoD. And this is it's not just a trend. This is for a lot of categories of spending. The DoD is just going to be right up there. So it's usually going to be a focus area. All right. I want to look at year over year just because that's what my brain can understand. This is very strange. This is waste management, right? And this is, well, is it? It's wait, hold on. What am I looking at? Waste collection. So solid waste, hazardous waste, and other waste. My first question, if I'm putting by the way, this is usually what I'm doing on consulting work. If I am putting a sales strategy together for a company, if I see this for one of their services, I've got a lot of questions. Why in FY23 is it 394 million and it over more than doubles in 24, and then it goes from 870 million to 2.7 billion. Why? So from 2023, FY23, 394 million to FY25 is $2.7 billion. Why is that? There's a reason for it. I can guarantee it. I don't know what the reason is. I could speculate. They might have changed some of the NAICS codes because they do that, right? So you may have, if you check a code and you don't see any spending there, it doesn't mean there's not necessarily any spending. They might have changed it. if you check a code and there's a ton of spending and then it dies off in like 21, 22, they may have just come up with a new code. But something happened here, and it doesn't. It couldn't. May have nothing to do with the code. It might have to do with, hey, there's a new waste management service the government is really spending a lot of money on. Maybe it has something to do with the fusion news that we've seen out of the Department of Energy or something. Probably not, since DoD is the top purchaser here. But something's going on here. I want to know what it is. All right, but that's not why you guys are here. It's small business. Stay on course. Stay on target. All right. So let's look. Remember these numbers: 2.7 billion in FY25, 870 million in 2024. This is all businesses. How much of that is going to small businesses? Oh, I also want to know who's my target. Right now, it's the Army, followed by the Air Force. I can't imagine it's not with that much spending. So the Army has clearly been spending a crap load of money on waste, waste management. No, I got to get out of this. Recipient, we're going to go to recipient type, small business. Okay, let's see what changed. Still Department of Defense, still the Army. But by the way, what did it shrink from? Like $3.2 billion to $229 million? That is a dramatic reduction, right? Which means most of that money went to large businesses. Yeah. Remember how big 2025 was? Now it's 210 million. It was 2 point something billion. FY24, 257 million, 23, 200. This is interesting. You know what I'm thinking? Sometimes when you're doing data analysis, um, sometimes a couple big contracts can throw the whole thing off. All right. So, but this is why we do this, right? We can't just look at one data set and say, oh, waste management, great to go, billions of dollars being spent. That could be $2 billion going to, I don't know, GE or like Honeywell or something. And then you remove them. And maybe for a small business, it might not be such a great move. Again, start looking at the individual contracts as well. All right. So I'm just going to click on one randomly. And again, it's giving us some information here. It's talking about different options that have been spent. An option year, typically what they're talking about when you see these option years is if it's a service that's being provided, you might win in fact, one of our GovClose students, I won't say his name here, but he just won direct. He used the acquisition forecast method that I went through on the last live session, and he won potentially a $10 million contract. So it's a $2 million a year contract. He won the 1 year plus 4 option years after that. Okay. So those option years provided you're doing good work and the funding's there, the government can exercise those option years. And this is why people put up with the ass pain of government contracting, folks. It can be very lucrative and it can be consistent. All right. But it takes a little while to get the ball rolling. And a lot of people don't ever figure out the formula. Okay. And we'll talk about like pipeline development. We do this on other calls. What I want to look at here, I just want to take a look at acquisition details and competition details. Okay. So this was a full and open competition, Treehouse, and there were 6 offers received. That's not that much. I've seen some of these I've opened up 30 offers, 40 offers received. So again, we'd have to look at a lot more, but yeah, looks like an interesting niche. So yeah, hopefully that answers some of your questions. All right. Well, and again, I'm just trying to hammer home the opportunity for companies to sell to the government here. There's spending that goes up every year. Often the number of companies trying to sell to the government is decreasing, not increasing, right? And I'm trying to change that, but there's an opportunity there. Okay, so great, Rick. You've hammered home how much the government's spending. You've shown us. We've gone through competition. We've looked at how we can tell the difference between big companies and small businesses. We've looked at even how competitive these little niche areas are and how to research them on SAM.gov. If you want to be part of a program and have a community where, GovClose, I personally onboard everybody. We have a great team. We have just under 200 people in GovClose right now. It's a combination. It's not a course. It's yes, there's on-demand training, but it's yes, government contracting 101, but then it's building a roadmap, just building off of way more in depth what we just did with USA Spending. We're building a sales roadmap. We're taking all the information, building a sales strategy. Then I'm showing building a pipeline. So everyone in there builds a pipeline of opportunities before I'm showing them how to find them before the solicitation comes out. You have to build a pipeline of opportunities that we can actually close so we can make a certain amount of money each year. Then we go through all the advanced strategies. But then you can't just end there, right? Because that's just slides, right? That's just videos where you're training. That's just you've put together a pipeline, but you have to execute. So everyone in there, they get the GovClose CRM, and we help them implement. So a lot of them go to start consulting businesses, helping companies. A lot of federal workers utilizing their past experience combined with government contracting to either go get an account executive job, start a consulting business, or start a business, or they have a business selling to the government. We train a lot of teams. It's a 1-year program, and they're crushing it. I love them. They're killing it. So now we've gone through all of that only to get to SAM.gov. This is where your business has to be registered to sell to the government. So if you want to register your business, you can do all of that right here, right? So you register your entity, the entity. See if I can zoom in. Just click get started. There's a bunch of things you have to do here, right? But there's nothing cosmic about it. By the way, some people will try to charge you to register your business in SAM.gov. Now, if you just don't have the time, you're a busy business owner, and you don't want to do it, great. But you do not have to pay somebody to register in SAM.gov. In fact, I want to say there's something in here that talks about that gives you some guidance, some government guidance as to who should be registering your business. I think it should be you because most of the information in here you're going to have, it is not cosmic. It's actually quite simple. And look, you can go right in here. There's an entity registration checklist. All right. So if you're not registered, this is not going to be a video about how to register your business, guys, because I can see a few questions coming in there. But if you click on it, this is the checklist, and I'll let you can go, anyone can go to SAM.gov, go through this. It's going to tell you everything you need, your business name, incorporation, state of incorporation. So you do need a business to register here. All right. And, some other things. I'm not going to go through that ad nauseum. If you're selling to a foreign military through the foreign military sales process, that's still using the federal acquisitions process. Okay. And that's what we're utilizing here. So it's all the same things would still apply. What I'm talking about is subcontracting. And someone gave me a subcontracting question earlier. So you don't necessarily have to be in SAM.gov if you're a subcontractor, because your contract is going to be with a prime contractor. But I would highly advise you to be registered in SAM.gov if you are going to be doing that. Now, that's registering. Where do you find these opportunities for small businesses? Okay. So this is where SAM.gov is going to put out contracting opportunities. I mentioned earlier, we are looking for opportunities before the solicitation comes out. Okay. That's the goal. But eventually, in most cases, a solicitation is going to come out. And assuming it's an opportunity that goes through SAM.gov, because they don't all go through SAM.gov. GSA, some other transaction authority stuff you might not see here. But assuming it's coming through here, it can come through set aside for small business. It can come through set aside already for the type of business you have. Someone on here was a service disabled veteran-owned small business, so it can come through set aside for that. Here's how you check. Hit contracting opportunities, which I already did. Let me back up. SAM.gov. Go to SAM.gov. Click search in the menu. Then what we're going to do is click on contracting. This button right here. Clicking on contracting. Okay. Now, as I scroll down, I want to see, I'm just going to look for opportunities that are set aside for small business. Okay. And here's the notice type. I'm right now, I'm going to show you what small businesses look for when they're typically failing in government contracting, when they're just starting out. And then I'll show you what to really look for. I'll give you that for free. I talk about it all the time anyway. Okay. But this is a solicitation. Solicitation, again, just to so everyone's on the same page. A solicitation. This is when the government has funding, because the government needs two things to put you on contract. They really need more than that, but they need funding to put you on contract. They need the money, and they need a requirement to put you on contract. And that's not just a guy saying, I need this. That's an official process where something becomes a requirement, right? So it could be aircraft parts, like we looked at earlier, it could be something else, could be accounting services. Then it's going to, most people in the government know nothing about how government contracting works and will never be able to put you on contract. There's a very small, I keep using the term less than 1%, but it is less than 1% and far less than 1% of people in the military or other government agencies are going to be a warranted contracting officer. A warranted contracting officer has the authority to commit funds on behalf of the US government. There are a lot of rules behind that. When a solicitation comes out, they have everything lined up. And they're basically usually asking you to write a proposal on these solicitations. Now, I can see some of these are going to be set aside, meaning if something's set aside for small business, that means only a small business can bid on it. You can see there's a lot of set asides that are listed here. Total small business is the top. So now that I have those on there, this is going to be, these should all be contracting opportunities that are set aside for small business. And there's 2,000 of them. Okay. That's just small business. Um, we could look at any of the other set asides too, right? We could look at how many of these are set aside for, okay. So there's eight, by the way, just looking at the opportunity, folks, there's 8,175 results for solicitations. Um, are all of these before the due date? Probably not. You can, this is a reason that there are so many paid for tools out there, but this is free. So anybody can go in here and look at it and you can, eliminate some of the noise. Let's take a look at 8A, right? Because 8A was something we talked about earlier briefly. There are 96 of these are set aside for 8A businesses. So let me ask you something, right? Do you need to be, can an 8A business bid on something that's not set aside for an 8A company and win? Well, the answer is yes, right? And you'll see that with the spending, right? So I was just looking at some spending the other day, right? So let's say I saw $300 million was awarded to small businesses with an 8A certification in FY24. I might see 300 awarded. I might see 200 million of that was set aside, you know, during the acquisitions process, which means that 100 million of it wasn't, but 8A company still won those. So that could mean anything, or it could mean just small business set aside, no set aside, full and open competition, lots of things that that could mean. But this is how we find some of the contracts that are set aside for small business. And again, guys, you do not need to just look for those. You can look for, what I would be looking for is I'd probably punching codes in here or searching through keywords, looking for opportunities that your company could actually solve. If they happen to be set aside and you have that, that's great. But I don't like to work with like, oh, if it happens to be, if I can get lucky, right? You're not, every now and then you get lucky in government contracting, but it's usually because you put the work in. So here's how you put the work in. We're not looking for solicitations. I'm looking for sources sought. Okay. And now, what a source is sought is, this is not, remember, a solicitation meant the government has funding and a requirement to put you on contract and the contract vehicle, everything's lined up, contracting officer, they're asking for proposals. The source is sought comes way before, not way before, but it comes usually months before the solicitation. Now you're in the market research phase. Now you're in a phase of contracting where the government can actually talk to you. right? If a solicitation comes out for machine parts we were looking at earlier, and you have questions on that, and you send me your questions as the government acquisitions office, I'm either not going to answer you, or if I answer you at best, I'm never going to let you just have a one-on-one conversation at this point. I'm going to answer that probably in a SAM.gov release so everybody can see it. Because the problem is if the government talks to you and not the other companies, that generates something called a protest. And some of you have probably heard of that. So that's where other companies can protest saying so there was some type of undue influence that you favored a company or they got information that everybody else didn't. Solicitations, that's like the line in the sand, right? So just think of it that way. There are exceptions to this, but now before that solicitation comes out during the market research phase, they're actively looking to talk to you. So all of these in here, all of these that we're looking at, these sources sought, this is the government. Look, they're not asking for a proposal, which is good because a proposal is a pain in the ass. They're asking you, there's probably like a list of questions that they want you to answer, right? So we're probably talking about like a page or two of information, but they're not asking you for a 15-page proposal. And they'll say right in here, they're not going to be awarding a contract from this. But they're not going to put this out unless they have a requirement and they either have the funding or they know when the funding's coming in. They're in the market research phase where they're trying to figure out like this visioning of a new museum. Look, the program manager here, they're not a, and he's not a, or she, they're not the museum experts. I wasn't the museum expert. I was the expert on putting companies on contract and managing those contracts, right? So they need to talk to companies that can put a strategic plan and a vision for our museum together and that have done it before. That's why this exists, right? That's why there's a market research phase. And God, I don't even know how many companies I've talked to. Most of them, even companies selling to the government, usually newer ones. Usually, once they've been doing it for a while and they're good at it, they know this exists. But a lot of them just don't. This is where we need to engage, and look, it's just part of the process. That's why it takes so long to sell to the government. I want to know this is where I'm going to start, if not before. So I'm going to respond to this sources sought, right? This is with the Navy. And you remember one of the searches we did, the Navy was awarding a ton of small business contracts. So let's see, Norfolk, what can we see here? It seems like no matter what I do a video on, I almost always come back to the sources sought. Love them or hate them, it's part of the game, but it also is an indicator. The NAICS code is Management Consulting Services. It's an RFI, okay? When we go down here, somewhere in here, it's gonna say, "This is not gonna result in a contract." But by the way, here's the dirty little secret. You can respond to a source of sought and still get a sole source contract. Let's say you're the only one. You could respond to this. You're basically helping the government write the solicitation, right? You can put anything you want in this source of sought. You can say, if you're an SDVOSB, I think you should set this aside for an SDVOSB. I think you should set this aside for small business. They don't have to do it, but you can make these recommendations. If this is for a museum, I could be like, hey, um, we think if this was my expertise, again, you want to make sure that you have past performance, that you are an expert here. But hey, we've done 10 projects like this, and 7 of them we've started using augmented reality to do some of the tours in the museum. And this has improved attendance rate by 14%. It's increased revenue by 3%. It's blah, 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 give metrics like that. Now you could potentially be inserting this augmented reality solution into this museum vision. And that's the power of this. Also, now the government knows you, right? You could ask for a meeting. All of this is happening before the solicitation comes up. So by the time the solicitation comes out, you might have got them to set it aside for your type of business. You may have got this augmented reality thing inserted in there. Maybe your company specializes in that. In in short, it's going to look like the solicitation was written for you if you did this right. And it's not always going to work that way, but it can. And this is why we engage on source to sought. So by the time that solicitation comes out, the government office already knows who you are. You've helped them write it. You've given great input. Maybe you've met them. And then you're going to have a couple other companies that didn't bother with the source to sought. The office doesn't know who they are. Who's likely to win? Um, this, again, this source is sought. They are looking for your company name, cage code. So by the way, it looks like mainly they're looking for capability statements. Everyone, you should have a CAPE statement for the company that you own or you work with. One page, I recommend. Keep it simple and edit it for these opportunities. But so they're asking for that. They want your ability to support. They want your past performance efforts. So they're looking for, hey, have you done this type of work before? Provide contract. By the way, this is why if you've heard me rant on, 'cause there's this like notion out there in that social media that you can middleman these government contracts. Bad idea, and very difficult to actually pull off, because they're basically trying to match these with companies that do the work, and they're trying to take a piece in the middle. But look, the government does not want a middleman. The government wants you to have past performance. Ideally, you have government past performance, but you don't have to. You have to start somewhere, right? But it's a lot easier after you already have the government past performance. These are all different. Indicate, hey, can you be the prime contractor? If not, someone was asking about subcontracting. Can you be the subcontractor, or are you going to be using subcontractors? So they want to know, right? They want to know who's doing the work, who's doing the subcontracting, or all these are going to have percentages and whatnot. I know who the contact is because it's in here. It's not, see, this is what I was talking about. This is not an announcement for contract, request for proposal, a promise to contract, or any commitment, right? Because it's not yet. And because of that, they can talk to you. That's the value here. And let's see here. Oh, well, look, this is my get off the stage card. If anyone wants in-depth training, this is not like an easy 3-day course. Is a 1-year implementation program. If you do want to get into government contract, if you want to learn government contracting, how to sell to the government, and you want to turn that into one of 3 revenue sources. So that is selling to the government, your business selling to the government. That is getting a job with a company. So these are, I'm talking high pay account executive jobs. My first one was 320 grand a year, right? That was the contract. So like these are high paid. They want to know that you know what you're doing. But just to give you some like reference, I mean, we've had kids in their 20s go through our program, walk in, compete against 30 plus seasoned pros and win those type of jobs because no one understands the data like we do going through it like this. So when you're able to go in and tell a company, hey, this is how much the government spends on your company each year. This is how they do it. These are contract mechanisms. This is how long it takes. You need this contract vehicle. You don't have it. You're focused on the wrong agency. This is the office. Like you're blowing people away. Like very powerful. And of course, my favorite is starting a consulting business because I like having those extra streams of revenue coming in, and you can do that and have a job. I've done it. A lot of people in the program are doing it. Again, this is a year-long program, so it's not for everybody. But if you do affects you, maybe you have a veteran federal background, yeah, go to govclose.com, check that out. Would love to either at least talk to you about it. We have a free training, and then we have 2 people that onboard. We have one person, Hal. He onboards anyone with military experience. And we have Luke. He onboards everybody with maybe a federal background or a professional background. Right? Look, maybe even just got out of college. My 19-year-old niece got hired with an aerospace company as an intern. She's been through the program. So look, this can work for a lot of people. Very lucrative, very cool. All right, we'll see you next time. Thanks for your questions and comments. Take care. Cheers.